Skyward Sword is famous for being linear and featuring a lot of motion controls, and recently I got to finish its version for the Switch. Was it an underrated masterpiece, or was it one of the worst Zelda games ever? Well, I played the whole game to find out. So let's start with the dreaded motion controls. Playing this with one Joy-Con in each hand wasn't the best thing ever. I think swinging your Joy-Con as if it's a sword sounds really good on paper, but when you're in a boss fight, it can just get really annoying. And hey, if you really hate it, you can use button controls, but I actually found that to make the game more difficult. So yeah, the motion controls can get a bit infuriating, but in my case, I got used to them after a bit of a while. But on to the rest of the gameplay, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Stuff like shaking the left Joy-Con to spin out the water is really satisfying, and I'm glad that you can move the camera around freely when you have motion controls on. But I have to admit, using some of your items in this game is just so tedious. Stuff like aiming your bow is way harder than it needs to be, and some gameplay mechanics were surprisingly difficult to figure out when I first played. But obviously, a Zelda game wouldn't be a Zelda game without dungeons, and this game definitely has them all right. Now, you might have a completely different opinion on this, but in my opinion, this game's dungeons were just decent. There were no dungeons that particularly made me go, oh wow, I absolutely love this, but there were also none that I hated. The themes of the dungeons are pretty good and creative, and most of the puzzles are alright. But tied with the gameplay I talked about earlier, I definitely think it brings them down a bit. That being said, I really enjoyed dungeons like the Fire Sanctuary, containing beautiful visuals, interesting puzzles, and even a bit of story. But what about the enemies and bosses? Are they really fun to fight, or are they just awful? Well, for me, they're kind of alright-ish. A lot of the enemies in this game require you to swing your Joy-Con at a particular angle to defeat, and I definitely struggled with a few of those, especially the Skulltula. But I have to say, hitting enemies like the Goblins are really satisfying, and you feel so good when you defeat a boss. But when it comes to bosses, this game doesn't have the best ones. Even the easiest boss in the game was hard to defeat when I first got to it, and the designs of them are just kind of weird. Sure, they're satisfying to defeat, but that's about it for me. Some bosses are even repeated 3 times, and to be honest, it just feels lazy. One thing that wasn't lazy though was this game's music. A whole orchestra played the music for this game, and while the music isn't my favourite, there are many songs from this game I actually really like, such as the Tadtone Hunt music, Ballad of the Goddess, or Faron's Courage. But I have to say, there are some things so nice about this game, like the coziness of being in the Night Academy, or the feeling of discovering a new island in the sky. I really wish that the sky area was expanded on more than the surface, and maybe the remake should have had more effort put into it, but despite that, I really enjoyed this game. Sure, it definitely has a lot of downsides, but if you can look past all that, Skyward Sword HD is a pretty decent game.